The Common Ground World Competition happening on November 5th, 2024 will feature the fish tank meta. The craft requirements for fish tank are 4 molten glass, 1 limestone, 1 salt, 25 water, and 2 salmon. It is crafted in the arts and decor shop with the craft time of 120 seconds and stored in the warehouse. For this competition, fish tank will give 30,000 stars for each one sold. The trade time for this competition is 50 seconds with a 1 gasoline cost per trade. The starting layout provided for this competition is a forest biome facing west with 2 oceans, one on the east side and one on the west side. There's also a desert on the south side. You start with a seaweed farmer and some seaweed farms as well as 2 water pumps. It's really not a great start. The easiest way to start up would be by setting up gold production. You can sell some of the ponds for cash to build up a forge after you set up a way to collect energy. The cash boosts for this competition are silica from 1,000 to 3,000, shrimp from 1,800 to 5,000, and salt from 2,250 to 7,000. The rewards for this competition are the standard Gala rewards for reaching the top 1,200 placements in the leaderboard by the time the competition ends. Rewards are usually distributed directly to your account within 5 days. Now I'm going to show you my competitive fish tank design. This one has full passive water and energy. It is possible to create a design without utilizing full passive water or full passive energy, and it's probably still going to be very good, but I decided to go with the full passive water and full passive energy strategy for this design. So it is making 21 fish tank per hour. I am going to scroll through the entire production monitor so you can see all of the production rates. It is being limited by the amount of chromium and limestone it is making in order to make more molten glass or more fish tank. It's actually making enough salmon to potentially make 27 fish tank per hour. As you can see right there, the salmon production rate is at 54 per hour and each one requires 2 salmon. Salt is not an issue at all. That's going to be overproduced. That's the easiest thing to do for this design, and it is making enough wood for just about enough lumber for all the current chromium and limestone. So if you were to increase the amount of chromium and limestone you would want to make, you would also have to increase the lumber rate. Now I'm going to explain all of the crafting processes going on in this design. I'm going to start with salt because that's the easiest thing to explain, and I'll be explaining the wood gathering in the process. So I have 11 logger houses in charge of collecting wood from the 19 tree farms. All of these tree farms have the passive water that they need, of course, and they are all on a green craft timer. I only have the 1 tractor right here in charge of collecting brine from the 2 salt fields, which get their passive water from these 2 ponds. The salt fields are on a green craft timer because they are being positively impacted by salty, which is given by the ocean right here. I have 2 silos. This silo should store only the brine. The other silo will store only seaweed, which I'll get to later. And I have 1 windmill in charge of crafting salt. This windmill will be on a green craft timer because there's no shade impacting it. And then I have 1 storehouse in charge of only storing salt. Now to explain molten glass production, I have 8 water pumps in total. You do need to build a water pump in order to build a power plant or a nuclear power next to it. I'm not going to focus on this one just yet. I will explain that one later. But 7 water pumps means I also have 7 power plants connected to them. This is for the 3 passive energy that they give in a 3-2-1 radius. This allows me to have all the passive energy I will need for all of the shallow mines making chromium and limestone, as well as the sand mines making silica, as well as the 3 lumber mills that are making lumber. That lumber gets stored in the 1 lumber yard that I have right here. Lumber is overproducing in this design, which is fine. You only need to store lumber here. Sometimes wood will get stored here, but it'll be quickly picked up by the lumber mills to make more lumber. If for some reason you're overproducing wood, you do need to put wood on auto sell, which you should put on auto sell anyways, just in case, so that the lumber yard doesn't doesn't jam up with wood. Otherwise, your mines won't be able to collect any lumber to craft any chromium or limestone. I have 9 water facilities in charge of crafting water drums. Although it is overproducing water drums, you really only need 8 of them crafting water drums for this design to work, but I happen to have 9, and you can also add more water facilities if you want to by replacing some of these roads and also adding another pond. I have 14 shallow mines. 8 of them are making chromium. These are the ones that are closest to the glass factory setup right here, and the other 6 on the east side are making limestone. I have 5 sand mines making silica, although you really only need 4 of them to make this design work, so silica will be overproducing. I have 3 forklifts in charge of collecting silica from the sand mines and taking them to the 3 warehouses that I have. Forklifts will also pick up oil from the oil pumps. And I have 7 glass factories making molten glass. The salmon production is taking place just right here on the west side of this design. I have 1 seaweed farm on a green craft timer. It is positively impacted by the salty provided by the ocean, and it only needs 2 water, which is provided by this pond, which is also being used for the water pump. I have 3 seaweed farmers in charge of picking up seaweed and taking it to this silo right here. You might actually only need 2 seaweed farmers to make this work. I don't think the third one is actually really needed, but I decided to keep it in here anyways. I have 1 aquaculturist house in charge of picking up seaweed, taking it to the 1 shrimp farm that I have, and then taking the shrimp back to the seafood warehouse, which also stores fish chum and salmon. The shrimp and seaweed also gets picked up by the mixing tent right here in order to craft fish chum. Then I have 1 fisherman house in charge of picking up the fish chum and taking it to the 4 wild net fishing that I have right here in order to craft salmon, then take it back to the seafood warehouse. So for these 4 wild net fishing, they do require 3 energy, and I have the nuclear power right here, which provides the 4 passive energy for these and 3 passive energy for this one, so you won't need to manually craft energy for those. Now, in case you're wondering, can you make a power plant here? No, it's not going to work the same because these are negatively impacted by dirty. So if you have a power plant, they are going to be on a red craft timer, which makes them not efficient. They're going to take a long time to craft, which is why you really need a nuclear power in order to make this design work efficiently. Now, the nuclear power is very expensive. You want to make sure you built it in the correct spot, and you also want to make sure you don't accidentally press the delete key on your keyboard because it will instantly delete the building. And of course, that just leaves fish tanks, which is crafted in the art and decor shops. I have 4 art and decor shops. Notice that only 3 of them are turned on. You actually only need 3 of them turned on to make this design work. The 4th one is not necessary, but it is here anyways, just in case you find a way to improve the chromium and limestone rates, which therefore would increase the molten glass rates, and then you could reach potentially up to 27 or maybe even 30 fish tank per hour. If you did want to go above 30 fish tanks per hour, you might need more than 4 art and decor shops. All 4 of these art and decor shops do have the 25 passive water, which is required to craft the fish tank. So they only need to make a total of 8 trips to storages to pick up the other items that they need. So that would be 5 trips to the warehouse to pick up 4 molten glass and 1 limestone, 2 trips to the seafood warehouse to pick up 2 salmon, and 1 trip to the storehouse, which is pretty close, to pick up salt. For the gasoline setup, I already explained the power plants and the water pumps. So there are 2 refineries. This one is crafting gasoline, this one is crafting petroleum, and I have 5 oil pumps to get all the crude oil for the gasoline that's being used in this design. You probably also don't even need all 5 oil pumps. You could probably do fine with just 3, and all of that gets stored in the fuel storage. You also want to make sure that you turn off all of your power plants. You don't want them taking in crude oil to manually craft energy. Like I said, this design is full passive on energy, so you don't need to be making any energy. You also want to turn off your nuclear power. That makes energy for free, but you don't need to manually craft energy for this design. And for the optional spots, you could put builder houses, or you could use these 2 spaces to build a road, and then you can have another building next to it. Additionally, you could also just have pave roads in these spots. This will or should help the art and decor shop workers move to and from their houses just a little bit quicker. I would imagine they would take those paved roads, but I did not test it. And some of these roads can be replaced or moved, so you use subgrade placement that would allow you to have a few more buildings placed. Here's what the auto cell looks like. All the items are here with an auto cell quantity of 10, with the exception of brine and seaweed. Those are at 15. Notice how salt is not being sold. You do not have to auto sell salt. It's the only item being stored in the storehouse, so it's gonna be okay if the storehouse jams up, but you can. There is more than enough gasoline being produced to auto sell everything. I do suggest you add wood to auto sell. I did not do that here, but if you are going to be using NFTs that will impact the production rates of your wood, you might possibly be overproducing wood, so you definitely want to have that on auto sell just in case. Here's what the build looks like on the visualizer. Total cost is 25.4 million, but you will have to account for the amount of cash that you will waste on the ice production setup to collect the ice blocks required to build the seafood warehouse, as well as the steel mill to collect the steel required to build the nuclear power. It is also a forest biome, so there will be a lot of trees to clear. So in total, with all that accounted, you're probably gonna want closer to 36 million cash in order to do everything. And that doesn't really even account for the wages, so you might want to have an additional 1 million to account for that. It is gonna take a while to collect all of that cash and then build out this entire design. Wages are at 20,850 per minute, but you will have no issue paying the wages once you are done. You can find the file for this visualizer in my Discord server, and an invite link is in the description. And I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but yeah, this is a no NFT required design. Now, improving it past this point without utilizing NFTs is going to be very difficult. Honestly, I think you might need to even come up with another design if you're thinking of improving this, but you would want more shallow mines in order to craft more chromium and limestone, but you would also eventually need more tree farms, which is a problem because there's just not enough space for that. So it's going to be hard to improve this design right here. But don't get me wrong, it is possible to make more than 21 fish tank per hour. You might even need to manually be making some water. It might not be the best idea to go full passive water for the art and decor shops, but I like to keep things simple, and I liked how this design came out with the full passive water for the arts and decor shops. I think it is a competitive design. It's gonna work just fine, but if you wanted to go for something more competitive, yeah, there is probably a better design where you don't have full passive water and you have more space for the mines. Now, if you are going to be using NFTs, the most helpful NFT for this design, in my opinion, would be the Greasy Wheels card. Well, that's kind of a lie. There are other NFTs that are way more expensive that are going to be more helpful. But speaking of budget-friendly, helpful NFTs that a lot of people may have is the Greasy Wheels effect card. This card will reduce the craft time of all of your mines by a certain percentage depending on the rarity you have, and this will allow you to craft chromium and limestone quicker. Now, Now, if you do have higher chromium and limestone rates, you're probably going to want another glass factory. You could easily replace one of these water facilities for a glass factory. Like I mentioned before, you can also build more water facilities if you need to. Now, if you do that, you are going to also be using more lumber. So you're going to want effect cards that reduce the craft time of lumber in the lumber mill. You could also just build a 4th lumber mill. That will work just fine, but you will also need NFTs that reduce the craft time of tree farms. The most easy to get one would be the Common Ground Town Hall, but there are other ones such as the Hatchet Hang Juniors, which will also help with this. And you can easily implement the Hatchet Hang Juniors because there are spots here that you could use. Hatchet Hang Juniors only cast 1 shade, so you can have them closer to those tree farms without impacting them. Like I mentioned earlier, you could also use some kind of subgrid placement here to afford 1 more spot where you could also put Hatchet Hang Jr. And like I said, over here you could put 1 more building. So even if you don't mess with the salmon production or you don't have any NFTs that would help there, you could push this up to 27 fish tank per hour with the use of some NFTs that help with the chromium and limestone as well as the wood and lumber. I hope you found all this information helpful and informative. If you did, please leave a like, leave a comment with any questions or feedback you may have. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so. If you want to help support the channel, you can find links in the description of the video. And as always, I appreciate your support and thank you for watching.